Welcome back! Today we are traveling to the late 1600s to a city of canals, gondolas, and popstars. I bet you didn't think that was coming next. It was a very different world then. Money was tight due to war. Trade had vanished. They were battling a plague every other week. Well, maybe not so different after all. It's safe to say it was not a good time to be a wealthy aristocrat, let alone a commoner. But if there is no hope in this dismal state of affairs, you wouldn't know it from walking down the docks in the evening as music and laughter rang out among the citizens. Music became the people's last refuge for enjoyment, going so far as to be included in the curriculum of the Ospedalle della Pieta, a convent dedicated to helping the poor and needy. The convent set out to turn the orphans received through a small opening in the wall into productive members of society. Boys were taught until they were 15, while girls could stay on as long as they chose. But raising orphans doesn't come cheap, and the convent needed donations, so it instructed its orphans in music, performing for tourists, civilians, and royalty alike. One little girl would turn this musical orphanage into a pop star factory, but the nuns didn't know that when little Anna Maria della Pieta was passed through the convent's wall. But being a musician was not the focus of the school. The convent had a whole community within its walls. The children learned normal reading, writing, and arithmetic, but they also became seamstresses, pharmacists, and more. They even had their own bank, which paid the children as well as gave out loans and kept dowries for the girls, though few ever used them. And then the children learned music. Music lessons were short, intense sessions with 3 classes a week and 1 hour of practice. Barely a part-time job. One may think they spent their whole life learning a single instrument in particular to reach the mastery that they had, but that would be incorrect. In fact, historians still debate what some of these instruments even are. They were so obscure. The girls were encouraged to play every instrument. The school brought in renowned teachers, such as Vivaldi, and had a whole branch of the government dedicated to maintaining and restoring the school's extensive instrument collection. In one famous example of the girls' multiple skills, an acclaimed oboe player was performing well into her 60s when her teeth fell out. No matter, she simply switched to the violin and continued performing for over a decade. This approach may seem far-fetched. After all, specialization makes you better at a task, but that is not always true. For example, Roger Federer has won 103 ATP singles titles, the second most of all time. This includes 20 Grand Slams, 8 Wimbledons, and 6 ATP finals. And what is the most interesting thing? He didn't focus on tennis until he was 12. He also played badminton, soccer, basketball, and cricket. Still not convinced? Frances Hesselbein was a homemaker after she graduated high school. She cared for her boys, ran bake sales, and volunteered for the Girl Scouts. Then, at age 51, she was offered a position. Since then, she has been the CEO of 3 companies, co-edited 27 books, written 3 autobiographies, won presidential awards, and received several honorary degrees. Today, she is the president and CEO of the Frances Hesselbein Leadership Institute at the ripe old age of 104. And what is she most proud of? She never has applied for a job. The Venetian Music School was approaching music in the same way these remarkable people did. Test everything, then decide. But even the musical Venetian pop stars had their problems. Women were not allowed to play music in the 1700s, so the convent invented something similar to a blind audition. The girls would play behind a screen for their audience, who could only see their silhouettes. This concealed the girls' identity, much like blind auditions today, which allowed the music to be appreciated more than their gender and appearance. A good thing, if you ask me, despite those who wish to end this practice today. Anna Maria's music was described as the veritable embodiment of all that is good and beautiful. She was an angel ascending into paradise. One French politician attempted to view the girls and was diverted, concluding that there is nothing so diverting as the sight of a young and pretty nun in a white habit. This air of secrecy made the girls mysterious and unattainable sirens, bewitching their audiences and drawing them like moths to a flame. But when Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was so enamored with the music, insisted on viewing the girls, he said he was driven to despair. A far cry from his prior endorsement that the music had not its like, either in Italy or the rest of the world. Many of the women that had given their children to the convent had been afflicted with syphilis, and their children suffered disfigurement. Lost eyes, ears, and noses were everywhere. But when their appearance was stripped away, only beauty remained. In fact, some girls even leveraged their musical prowess to make advantageous marriages. Anna Maria was one of the girls that decided to marry. She and her husband, a violinist named Ludovico Sirman, toured together, and she took singing roles on the largest stages of her day. She composed, trained, and conducted until she died, with her works in print for more than 60 years after her death. It is understandable that her fame throughout Europe attracted more and more students to the school. Some aristocrats would sponsor their child at the convent, giving a donation to support him and another impoverished student. Some other aristocrats were cheapskates, just like today. They would abandon their young child at the convent and conveniently pick up their prodigy a few years later. Stellar parenting. Unfortunately, all the instruments, concertos, operas, and beautiful, priceless arts stored in the convent are, for the most part, lost to time. In 1797, Napoleon walked into Venice and the convent, destroying the manuscripts and records, leaving little behind. The daughters of the choir played their last performance in 1840, and the Ospedale della Pieta is now a hotel. But their story still survives to this day as a reminder that pop culture is a human tradition. Thank you for watching. If you were to learn an instrument, what would it be? Perhaps one of the girls' rare and elusive ones, such as, say, sambuca? No, not the liquor. Let's talk in the comments.